In this video, I'm going to talk about some security best practices that apply to basically all operating systems. But what I will do in follow-up videos is I'll show some demonstrations on how to do the things that I'm mentioning in Windows 10. A lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about are a little bit extreme, and really the safest way to protect your computer is not to connect it to the internet at all. But that's really not practical. Your machine is a lot less useful. And so in all of the examples that I'm showing, you're really going to be trying to make a balance between what you need to do with your system and the risks that you're willing to take. It's virtually impossible to completely protect yourself from attacks and be online. Even security experts can be attacked. It's just a very tough problem. But hopefully some of these ideas will help you avoid some of the more frequent and easier attacks that can happen on your system. So the very first one is one that actually is done automatically if you keep all the default settings with Windows 10. But what you want to do is you want to upgrade all your software frequently, upgrade and update. So this includes your operating system, all of your applications, and so Office, Adobe Reader, you name it. Now this is where you can get into a little bit of trouble with some of the automatic updates because they might not be automatic. There's some applications that you actually have to go and search for updates yourself. The last thing that's really important in this category is to have an antivirus program installed and make sure that it's getting updates as well, because the security community is constantly reviewing new viruses and creating what they call signatures. And if you're not performing upgrades, you don't get that new information, and your virus protection software won't be able to protect you from those attacks. Another thing is that you don't want to click on links, and this is obviously a very tough one with the internet. The internet really isn't all that useful if you don't click on links, but it is one of the ways that people get attacked quite frequently. And I guess the place where you really want to be careful of this is in things like Facebook, Twitter, email messages, things that you receive from others. You want to be really careful about clicking on those links. If you go to Google or Bing, most of those are going to be fine. Again, it's just most of them. You just have to be really careful with clicking on links. And in the follow-up video that I do on this one, I'll show you a couple of ideas. One, definitely you want to sort of check the source, make sure this is someone that not only you trust to have sent you something real, but they're not compromised themselves. And like I said, there's no guaranteed way to do either one of those. People can be spoofed. Basically, someone can look like they're sending you something and it's really coming from someone else. The other thing you can check in this area is make sure that the link you're being sent to is a legitimate site, or at least appears to be a legitimate site. Very complicated things to do, but I'll show some examples when I go through that. Very similarly, you don't want to open attachments. And so again, one of the big ones here is in email, but you can also have attachments on other messages as well. Text messages is one that you want to be careful of too with these links and attachments. There can be some pretty bad stuff in these. Years ago, people used to think the only thing you had to worry about was executables or batch files or things that contain macros. But in the last few years, it's been shown that you can be attacked from almost any kind of document that you're sent, PDF files, Word documents, even images. Basically, the way that this works is if attackers find a vulnerability in the software that you're running that consumes these files, they can send a bad version of those files to take over your system. It's really unfortunate and bad. They keep on trying to work on solutions for this, but the attackers always seem to be a step or two ahead of the fixes that are being made to software. This next one probably is one that everyone will think, oh yeah, of course not. But it's amazing how often this one will hit you. Windows and Android devices are really nice because anyone can develop software for them. and you could install software from anywhere. But quite literally, you take a software package and you install it. You're letting that software package do anything it wants to your system. They could be installing a keylogger, and a keylogger is something that can watch everything you type. And so you type in your password, it catches that. If you take a video, it captures that. So installing software is very dangerous. You want to take that from a reliable source. Now, one of the reasons that Apple's a little safer in this regard than Windows and Android is that they lock down their devices. And so the only place you can get applications from is the Apple Store. And when they get applications into the Apple Store, they do some extra checks that aren't done, of course, on things that are just open on the internet. Now, they don't catch everything, but they do a very good job of trying to catch things. You'll get the same protection if you use the Microsoft Store to get apps for Windows 10. The problem is that the Microsoft Store doesn't have all of the apps in it. There's a couple of them. I was just checking the other day, and TurboTax isn't available in the Microsoft Store. And so it's very limiting in the fact that they don't have everything in there. But if you can, pick it up from there, and there's a much less chance that you're going to have something that's compromised. Everyone always talks about this one, very, very important. For anything that requires a password, you want it to be a secure password. So something that's not a word in the English dictionary, some string of numbers or letters that are common. You want to do combination of uppercase, lowercase, everything like that, and then probably combine words, if not even better, just generate some random characters. But of course, when you do really secure random passwords, it's tough to remember what they are, and so people tend to reuse them. But when you reuse a password, if you use a password on site A and site A is compromised and you use the same password on site B, the attacker that successfully attacked site A can now also go onto site B and get information. And this is really unfortunate if they're able to maybe break into your, I don't know, you have maybe you're part of meetup.org and you use the same password there as you use on your bank account. It went from something that maybe wasn't that important to you to something that could break your savings. So very important to keep two different sets of passwords. Well, not two different sets, different password for every site. And you want to make sure each one is secure. Another one that you hear quite a bit about is be very careful with using public Wi-Fi. If you're browsing to websites, reading news articles and all that kind of stuff, the only thing someone can do is they can see what you're reading and maybe store some information about you. But once you start signing into sites, accessing personal information, you're always running the risk that maybe that site isn't properly secured. If the site completely uses HTTPS, the secure protocol, and they've implemented that correctly, you're pretty safe on a public Wi-Fi, but there's just no way that you can know that's just not something that's under your control. So if you can avoid a public Wi-Fi, use hotspot is better. Wait to do things like banking or looking up sensitive personal information until you get home or you get to work. Probably even more important than this is don't use public computers. All the places that, not all, but many places that offer public computers, they're trying their best to keep those systems protected. But if someone gets a malicious software on there, doesn't matter what you do, they can get at your information. So be very careful on using public computers. Also wanted to mention, you got to be careful about using media from unknown sources. And so this includes things like CDs, USBs, and memory cards. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you find a USB stick on the ground and you think, oh, I might have found something useful for myself. I'd love to have another USB key. Or maybe, oh, I'm feeling bad for someone. They might have lost their pictures, their resume, and I want to try to get this back to them. The problem is that as soon as you stick that into your computer, if you have autoplay on, it could potentially infect your computer if there's a virus on that system. And maybe the other thing that you have to remember too is if you take your USB that you know is clean, you plug it into someone else's system and that system is compromised, it can very easily and likely compromise your USB key. Now you stick it back into your system, open up a document from it or something, now your system is compromised as well. So very careful with with sharing your media, and in another video I can talk about some ideas on how to protect yourself on that one. Tough one here, only visit sites you trust. So even if you're not clicking on links and you're going and you're looking for sites yourself, attackers will actually register domain names that use common misspellings. And so I had one myself where I go to NBC News quite a bit, and I accidentally typed in 2 B's into the NBC. That took me to a attack site which compromised my system in a way that I couldn't tell whether I got rid of it or not. And so I ended up having to wipe out my whole system and come back. And so I'll walk through a couple of other techniques that you can try to do this, but I would definitely say double check when you type in a URL. Maybe create your favorites list when you do have URLs that you go to frequently, so you don't have to type them in and you're not getting the URL from an email or something. If push comes to shove, it's also fairly safe to use Google and Bing to search for a site. Just make sure that you're actually going to one of the top hits and that you're not going to an ad, because sometimes ads will point you to a site that's pretending to be that one, or it's even just something illegitimate that you shouldn't be going to. Google and Bing both try to keep on top of those, but the attackers put a lot of effort to make those things work. Also, one thing you want to do is, even if you have secure passwords and they're different, you do want to change those passwords regularly. Now, how often is totally up to you and what you think the risks are. But quite often when attackers get your information, they may not use it themselves. They may actually be selling it to others. And so it can take a little while between the time they get the information and when they're trying to use it to get to your system. So there's a chance that if you're changing your password frequently, even if you're compromised, there's a chance that you can change it before they do anything. Or if nothing else, at least you've limited how far they can get with it. They can only access your stuff while the password is the same, and then they're going to have to attack your system again to get back to it. So you want to be able to change them regularly. You also want to back up your data, and this one is primarily around ransomware. This is something that's been in the news for the last couple of years, where attackers will encrypt all your files on your computer so that you can't get access to them, and then demand a ransom. You have to pay them in Bitcoin. Now, if you have regular backups that you can get to, so this has to be a backup off of your system, because otherwise they're just going to encrypt that too. But then you can go and restore from there, and you don't have to get into the messy world of considering paying ransom and potentially put yourself on a list of people that are easy to get ransoms from, and then they'll continue to attack you. And then the last thing is defensive moves. There are a number of things that you can do to help protect your system even more than the things I've mentioned here. But the list is fairly long, and I'll sort of leave most of the details to the next video. But it's things like doing two-factor auth, freezing your credit, checking and setting your privacy settings. So anyways, lots of stuff covered here. Just wanted to give a quick overview of some of the things you want to consider and think about to help protect your system. And as I said, over the next few weeks or months, I'll post more details on each one of these.